Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the meeting summary.
You have a second?
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes. Item number 3, update on the fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 23 overall work program, OWP. Mr. Brown, you were up, sounding perfect today, by the way.
Right, thank you. Yeah, we had a little noise issue that we were able to correct. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to provide an update on the fiscal year 22 and 2023 overall work program. So this is a continuation of the discussion or an update to the discussion we had last month. And so some of the information will be a bit of review, but there is some new information since because of all the activities that have happened since that last meeting. So as a reminder, the OWP is a statement of work or scope of work known internally as the overall work program and is required as the basis of the contract that PAG has with ADOT. And each of the OWPs builds on the previous OWP. So the draft OWP presented to you builds on the current OWP that was adopted in 2019. It's shared with federal and state funding partners as we typically do, and it was done in April for compliance review because it is a federally required document. On April 22nd, we presented the draft OWP to the Regional Council, and key OWP budget components are included in the fiscal year 2022 through 2026 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, which was approved by the Regional Council on May 27th. Based on comments we received from management committee members, PAG staff developed written responses, which are included in your packet. And on June 2nd, the Regional Council Executive Committee endorsed the draft OWP. We've held one-on-one meetings with member agencies that have provided comments on the OWP. So far, we've met with city and county staff. And then at the June 16th meeting, the Transportation Planning Committee discussed the draft OWP. In terms of the organization of the document, because it is a federally required document for MPOs like PAG, we must include information about PAG's various roles and responsibilities in the document, information about our metropolitan planning organization and TMA designations, and then federal planning factors and emphasis areas are also discussed in the document. It's divided into several chapters. You can see the chapter covers here on your screen, and we cover 18 different work elements within these different chapters. So for each of those 18 work elements, the sections of the text include the purpose of that work element, the funding sources, the projected outcomes and estimated completion dates, as well as goals and strategies to achieve those projected outcomes. Of the 128 projected outcomes identified in the draft updated OWP, 80% are substantively similar as continuation of the adopted current 2020 and 2021 OWP efforts. 7% are added as new outcomes, and 13% are completed or removed when comparing the draft OWP with the current adopted OWP. In terms of committees and OWP elements, different elements are discussed at various working groups or PAG committees over the OWP implementation period. So for example, 102 distinct items related to the current and draft OWP were on various PAG and RTA committee agendas and discussed over the last 2 years. All proposed new additions or removed items are informed by these collective discussions and efforts as the proposed OWP was developed. And the development of the proposed OWP is an administrative function. At the May meeting, we talked about the different budget tables included in the draft OWP. There are 6 for each fiscal year. Table 1 shows the funds available, the different anticipated revenues by federal, state, and local sources. Table 2 shows the local share contributions, and those haven't changed from the previous OWP. Table 3 is a more detailed look at the total revenue by program area and work element. Table 4 shows the total expenditures by program area and categories. Table 5 shows the staff allocations by program area, showing a budgeted number 55.5 FTEs for fiscal year 22. And then table 6 shows the capital and equipment and pass-through funding, as well as consultant funding. That's of $5,000 of anticipated cost or greater, and that's also broken down by program area and work element. And it covers, in this case, 2 different pages. We had questions since the last meeting about the relationship between the TIP and the OWP. And so in this table on the top right, you can see various TIP program or project ID numbers in the left column with the Surface Transportation Block Grant or Surface Transportation Program. And you can see the acronym there, the amounts for each of those different TIP IDs totaled to $4,185,000. And then when you compare that to, and that's just for fiscal year 22, and if you compare that to OWP Table 1 for fiscal year 22, and you total the STBG rows, you also get 4.185 million, and those amounts should equal, and they do. So just wanted to mention that relationship between the TIP and the OWP. And please note that some fund sources like Metropolitan Planning or PL funds, which are federal funds, come directly to PAG and are not included in the TIP. We also received questions about carry forward. And so carry forward allows PAG to accrue funds over multiple years to be used for large planning studies or data acquisition that are periodic or one-time investments and not typically annual investments. So past examples include the High Capacity Transit Plan, the Regional Long Range Transit Plan, the Regional Freight Plan, and activity-based model technical support. In the draft OWP, it includes funding for new transit planning activities such as the Regional Transit Fleet Study and a Transit Comprehensive Operational Analysis. We talked about this last time, but just as a reminder, the OWP serves as the basis of an agreement between PAG and ADOT for implementing the OWP, and it's very, very detailed and talks about rules and responsibilities. And it's important to note that ADOT has the primary responsibility for administering FHWA and FTA funds allocated to the MPO and ensuring that such funds are expended for eligible cost purposes and activities. And so that's why it's important that the activities that we conduct as an MPO are consistent with this agreement and what's in the OWP. And we talked last time about the priorities for the next 2 fiscal years. At the very top, of course, the final years of the current RTA plan and making sure that our activities as an organization are helping to meet the commitments to the voters in the RTA plan, as well as developing the next RTA plan. Developing the next long-range regional transportation plan, which is a federal requirement. It's a multi-year effort, and that's also a priority. So even though that's not anticipated for adoption until 2024, that process is going to be beginning soon if it hasn't already started internally. And then fulfilling any obligations due to contract or federal and or state mandates, and then data and technical tools to support these efforts. So with that, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that concludes this presentation, and we're happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Appreciate the presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
And do we have any questions for Mr. Brown and his presentation on the OWP?
I have a question.
Then
I have a question. This is Artemio.
Okay,
So,
Mr. Artemio or Mr. Hoyas?
Yeah, so I just want to start off by saying that, you know, I spoke to my regional council representative. We've had a brief and concise discussion on all this. And so there's a clear understanding and support for what I'm asking, for what I'm vocal about in the planning process and for input at the management committee level and at the TPC level. So I just wanted to say that first. Secondly, I have a question for Jamie, and I hope you can answer this, Jamie, is that, you know, since May 12th, there's been a lot of damage control from this committee, you know, tabling or not voting on approval of this OWP. So I have a sincere question for you, which is, do you, as a strategic planner, do you believe that receiving questions, receiving comments, receiving concerns during the exact same meeting that you're asking for a vote, and then after, where you know, you receive written comments from, it appears, myself, the city, and the county, do you prefer that route in requesting approval for the OWP, or do you believe it is better to receive those comments, those questions beforehand?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Hoyos. I think, and I'll just speak for myself, I mean, I think we would certainly want to have that feedback sooner in the process. And I think it's been made clear by you and others that that would be a good path forward. So I think that for the next process, if we can make some adjustments to make that happen so we get that feedback sooner, I think, I certainly think that would be preferable. And but if others wanted to answer that as well. But does that answer your question, Mr. Hoyos? Yes,
and I do appreciate that answer, because you know, again, with my discussion with my you know, regional council rep, those are the three things that I'm fighting for, that I'm being vocal about, is input, transparency, and process. And you know, obviously, you know, this OWP needs to be pushed forward. You know, that's already been kicked into process. Okay, we're, you know, this one's done did, but you know, in 2 years, I hope that there's a commitment from PAG that the input process, or the request for input presentations, will be started months in advance, not, you know, it was stated a week, but actually 5 business days, but a week beforehand, because that's not enough time at all. And that's all I'm asking. You know, I think that's a simple request. You know, that was the same request I had, and that we discussed 2 years ago for the tip. And in my opinion, it didn't happen 2 years later. But, you know, I hope, again, for the tip and the OWP, you know, we follow the process. There's clear input and there's clear transparency. You know, I was invited for these one-on-one meetings, and you know, I was conflicted.
Mr. Hoyos?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hoyos, is there an additional question in here, or I think, you know, you made.
Well, I'm making a comment.
Okay.
I'm making a comment here. Let me finish. Is
Yeah.
that
so?
Well, I was conflicted. I was conflicted.
Mr. Hoyos.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Hoyos. Okay. You made these very same statements at the last meeting. You're making the same statements again. You know, it's all on record. It's all recorded. So is there another question for Mr. Brown on this, or?
Well, I have a comment that wasn't stated at the last meeting, which is,
okay, can you?
At the last meeting, we agreed we would discuss the questions that were presented by the jurisdictions, but these one-on-one meeting requests were preferred. And what I was about to say is that I don't believe these one-on-one meetings follows the principle of transparency. So that's why I did not participate in these one-on-one meetings, because they were non-public, and we had discussed at the management committee that we would discuss these in a public forum, and that did not happen. So I just wanted to make clear that that's
Okay.
why I did not participate.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions for Mr. Brown? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I think we have consensus. I believe, based on our conversations with everyone, we have consensus that we would want to recommend approval. So with that, I just want to confirm that. I believe the written comments were submitted in the packet. We had opportunity to discuss comments with TPC representatives as well as individuals that wanted to have that opportunity. So I just want to confirm that we have consensus for endorsement of the plan.
Okay, is that something, you don't need a formal vote on that, or what is it?
I don't. What I would appreciate, based on the comments that we've received, and my understanding that everybody's satisfied with the responses, just want a confirmation that there is consensus, and there are no issues that have not been addressed.
Yeah, I certainly am, and I see that we have a hand up from Mr. Ortega.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of order. I think it's not good to glean from these discussions a consensus. I think if you want a direction and vote, then let's take a vote. But I was just looking again at the agenda, and I don't think it was noticed that way. So that would cause me pause.
I'm just asking for a confirmation from especially folks that had questions, to make sure that there is consensus, that there was opportunity for input, there was opportunity to respond to their questions. I'm not asking for a vote. I just want to make sure that everybody acknowledges that the opportunity for input was there, and hopefully everybody is satisfied with the responses they've received in the packet as well.
So I believe there were 3 people that submitted questions.
There were actually 3 with questions and a 4th one with a statement of support. So we had an opportunity to meet with the City of Tucson and Pima County one-on-one. We believe they were satisfied with the responses. And then we had an opportunity to discuss it at the TPC, and we believe that there was consensus at the TPC as well, and there was no other input. So again, same thing here. We believe the opportunity was there from April 15th until today. So it's been over 2 months of working with all of partners to make sure that we have a good understanding of their input as well as the responses to everybody's questions. So it's up to you, Mr. Chair. Just want a confirmation that hopefully there are no other outstanding questions. It's up to you how you want to proceed, Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeBonis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to state from Pima County standpoint, we did meet with the PAG team. It was very informative in both directions. Some of the items that were touched on in the presentation by Mr. Brown today were responsive to the input that we had provided as far as how materials are presented and the linking together of the OPW and the TIP, and just how the details are laid out and displayed in both of those documents for greater clarity. So that was satisfactory to us. Similarly, our transportation representatives participated in the TPC meeting. I think we have a good dialogue, and that was really what was being asked for from the county's perspective, and I know others have cited that as well. One of the things that was suggested by us in those interactions with the PAG team was that it would be helpful going forward to see the timeline and the milestone steps for OPW development and processing laid out in similar fashion to what we've seen displayed for the TIP, for example. And the PAG team was responsive to doing that so that we have a clear understanding next time, and that we build into that process sufficient opportunities for discussion and input to be provided. So I think we're moving towards doing those things, and Pima County was appreciative of the interaction and feels comfortable with where we stand with the assembling of the overall work program.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hoyos?
Was there a consensus with the TPC group?
Yes, I believe we had a good dialogue, and Jamie was able to respond to a few questions. I believe based on the one-on-one discussions, we were able to answer most of those questions as well. So we believe there was support from everyone that had any questions to move forward.
And then one last question is, why wasn't it up for vote this meeting when it was up for vote in May?
So based on the memo from PAG Regional Council Chair, since then there was discussions with the immediate past chair and the current chair, as well as the management committee chair, as well as the TPC committee chair. And the memo that's in your packet indicated that since this is a contractual scope of work and negotiation with ADOT, it is really at the purview of the regional council, and the committees obviously provide input, feedback, but ultimately the action is a regional council's action, not any advisory committee's action. There's a memo from Mayor Murphy attached to your packet that attempted to address that question.
I did read it, and did regional council vote on that, or was it just the chair that?
The executive committee met on June 2nd, and that was at the request of the chair, and that was the consensus to make sure that it's a regional council action and not any contractual issue that goes to regional council. Is ultimately up to the regional council.
Mr. Ortega.
Regional council, all of regional council didn't vote on that.
Correct.
Mr. Ortega.
Thanks, Terry. So I agree with Carmine. I mean, I think we all had an opportunity based on the feedback that we got, or the feedback we provided and the dialogue that occurred with the staff. My hesitation is when you ask for a consensus of, and then you kind of go down this path where I'm not sure I'm clear on what the outcome of that is. You know, I think Mr. Chair, you had asked if there were any other questions. If the answer is no, or no one says anything, then everybody had adequate opportunity to voice their thoughts. To ask us as a body to agree to something, it just makes me a little more nervous, if you will, just because I don't know exactly what I'm agreeing to, other than to say, yeah, we had an opportunity to provide feedback and we are satisfied with the responses we got. I'm comfortable with that on my end. I don't know what else is there. And so I just find it a little different, that's all. And I'm just, we live in a world of clarity, right? With direction from our councils and our bodies. And it's always a little bit of a challenge when we get, a message that is not clear on that. So that's really the hesitation, Mr. Chairman, on my part, to just agree to say, yeah, consensus. I'm comfortable from our perspective that we were given the opportunity and that we had good responses. And I appreciate, Jamie and Farhad, your staff. I appreciate you guys, meeting with the staff and taking care of business on that.
So I gathered from Mr. Mohimi that what he was asking was whether or not the people who had asked questions, submitted questions, whether or not they felt that adequate opportunity, information, and dialogue, or the offer of dialogue had occurred, so that there wasn't anything stemming from them. Am I correct in that, Farhad? Mr. Mohimi?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. We got a feedback there. Yes, thank you. Again, it's just confirmation for our staff to make sure that we had the opportunity to respond. And if there are any other questions based on the written responses or based on the meetings we had, I just want to make sure that there are no outstanding questions at this point.
Okay.
None on the part of Oro Valley. Thank you, Farhad. We're satisfied.
Thank you, Mayor.
The town of Florida is also satisfied.
Thank you, Beth. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? I know Jamie wants to stay on the line, but he doesn't get a vote, so we're going to adjourn anyway. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.